I think if you want to be effective, I actually wrote a blog on this about being a leadership time traveler. In my experience, a leader has to learn from and honor the past, perform in the present, while setting the table for a more prosperous future. And if you think about those three time zones, you can't help but start to work your way back from what do I want the future to look like? What can I learn from the past to influence that so that I deliver in the present?
Welcome to Leadership, the podcast where leadership meets real-world insights. In each episode, you can eavesdrop on exclusive conversations with top thought leaders, best-selling authors, and experts in leadership, communication, relationships, culture, and everything else that shapes your effectiveness in the workplace and in your personal life. Leadership is here for you. Now, here's our host, himself a seasoned coach and best-selling author, Dr. Roger Dean Duncan.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Our guest for this episode of Leadership is Douglas Conant. If there were a Hall of Fame for business executives, Doug would certainly be a member. He served as president of Nabisco Foods, president and CEO of Campbell Soup Company, and then chairman of Avon Products. Doug is the only former Fortune 500 CEO who is a New York Times and Wall Street Journal best-selling author, who has been a top 50 leadership innovator, a top 100 leadership speaker, and twice named one of the 100 most influential authors in the world. Doug is a graduate of the Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern University, and for 5 years he served as chairman of the Kellogg Executive Leadership Institute. He's founder and CEO of Conant Leadership, a mission-driven community focused on championing leadership that works in the 21st century. Doug's most recent book is titled The Blueprint: 6 Practical Steps to Lift Your Leadership to New Heights. Let's just say this man has plenty of street cred. Doug, welcome to Leadership.
Well, thank you very much, Roger. It's great to be here and great to be reconnecting with you again. It's been a while.
It has. Well, I have some questions for you, and I bet you have some answers. Let's just jump right in. Many of today's leaders seem to think work life and real life are two separate identities. What do you see as the danger of that self-model?
Well, I think a mutual friend of ours, Bill George, talks about the importance of authenticity in leadership. And I don't think you can be two different people and be highly authentic with your audience. I think that's an impossibility. So what I encourage leaders to do is to pull those two things together and figure out how they can become the best version of themselves with the people with whom they live and with the people with whom they work. Look, life's complicated enough. If I have to behave differently with different audiences, I'm going to get lost in the sauce. And all the effective leaders I have known have found a way to show up highly authentically in both their personal and their professional environments. So I say you got to put that notion to the side. I would say when I growing up, there was clearly an expectation that you were going to have siloed behavior and that you were going to show up differently professionally than you did personally, and the two would never meet. I found that difficult. And I found it much easier just trying to be myself. I mean, it's hard enough to be one person. Trying to be two different people is beyond my capacity. And so I encourage people to just bring those two notions together and focus on being the best version of themselves.
Yes, that makes a world of sense. Well, let's go back early in your career. You were fired from your job. Tell us about that. What did you learn from that experience?
Gosh, I was 10 years into my career with the same company. It was General Mills, and then I was working for a subsidiary of General Mills. And I went into the office one day, and the woman at the front desk said, the senior vice president of marketing would like to see you. And I went up there, and he couldn't look at me. I knew there was an issue. And he said, Doug, your job's been eliminated. You need to be out of here by noon. And I've been working for the company for 10 years. And he was just trying to get me out the door as quickly as he could. Didn't want to have to explain. And so I went, packed up my office, drove home right early afternoon to my wife, my 2 small children, and my 1 very large mortgage, feeling every bit the victim. And I was shaken to my core. And this was at a time when you didn't talk about losing a job. It was almost shameful. Now sadly, we all have a story like that. But so it was incredibly hard for me. And in a nutshell, what I learned was I hadn't really done anything wrong. I knew I hadn't done anything wrong, but I hadn't done enough right. And I was keeping my head down. I'm introverted. It's hard to tell on this broadcast, but I'm introverted. And I was just keeping my head down, doing what was asked of me. And I wasn't leading. And I was supposed to. I had sort of graduated to a leadership position, and I wasn't leading. I was just going along to get along. And I learned as I went through an outplacement process for about a year that I had more to offer than that, and that I had to lean into this relationship, into my relationships at work, much more proactively, much more intentionally. And that's what I slowly but surely did. But it was incredible. It was painful and difficult.
I suppose it's possible that experience accelerated your learning.
Well, it was the best thing that could have happened to me. I didn't know that at the time. I was actually working with my outplacement counselor, who his name was Neil McKenna. He ran outplacement for Harvard business school graduates who were trying to stay in the New England area, and he ran the program for them and coached them. And so he was an exceptional guy who had been left for dead in the Argonne Forest during the World War.
Oh.
And, he was a tough, crusty New Englander. He wasn't going to put up with, oh, woe is me, I lost my job, what am I going to do? I think when I first met him, I was more like Eeyore than I'd want to admit. But he said, that's yesterday's news. Let's get on with it. And he helped me. And what he taught me was, what I learned through the process with him is that I had everything within me I needed to succeed. I just needed to get in touch with it and bring it to life with the people with whom I lived and worked. And I didn't have to be somebody else. I just had to be more of myself. I was an oldest kid, and I had sort of grown up doing what my parents expected me to do, my grandparents, and then my coaches, my teachers. That's what oldies do. You just took the cues from the next generation up. And somewhere along the line, I was just doing what my bosses wanted me to do. And I learned that wasn't good enough. I had put all of my capacity over in the parking lot while I was trying to make everybody else happy. So I had to get all of my skills, assets, and capabilities out of the parking lot, front and center, and then I had to show up. And it changed my life. It changed my life. I couldn't have done what I've done without having that encounter, losing my job, and then having the privilege of working with Neil McKenna.
Right. You never would have met that mentor had you not lost your job.
Right.
You lost your job, but you found yourself. You suggest.
Oh, I got it right. I'm going to remember that one. I've never used that line. That's perfect.
Yeah.
That's exactly what happened.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
All right.
I'm not even going to copyright it. You can use it.
Okay.
You suggest, Doug, an inside-out approach to personal development. What exactly does that mean, and what does that approach look like in actual practice?
Well, it's really a foundational notion in my book, The Blueprint. But I think we all know what great leadership looks like. We've experienced it in our lives. But we tend to put those experiences in the parking lot where we're trying to make other people happy. And what I believe is you have to get in touch with your life story. Our language in the book is your life story is your leadership story. And somehow we lose that while we're trying to make everything work. And the first thing Neil McKenna did when I went through my outplacement experience, he said, I want you to handwrite your life story. Everything you know about it. He gave me 2 weeks. I said, I don't have time for that. I got to look for a job. And he said, well, this is the perfect time for it because you don't have a job. So write your life story.
Right.
So it was about 50, it was lined paper, about 50 pages, front and back. And I wrote down everything. And he had it for 2 weeks, and then we got together again. And he said, Doug, I don't get it. Your life story is so rich. Your family history, your family came to this country with nothing and created amazing lives. And you're the apple that falls from that tree. And you've demonstrated it time and again in different situations. But when I talk to you about interviewing for a job, you just go into this, I'm going to answer the question, whatever the question is for my interview. And he said, you're never going to get a job unless you get outside of yourself and actually get into your life story. So I sort of examined my life story. I said, I have more to offer. And I started finding ways to express that. First in the interview process, then on the job search, and then ultimately in the way I showed up at work. Years later, I started working with an executive search person who helped me get to know high potential executives in all sectors. And together we hired, I hired/led over 50 executives who went on to become CEOs. And the way he did the interview process was fascinating. He could have cared less about the resume. The first thing he started asking them, his interview was, tell me about your childhood. Did you have a dog? Did you have to take care of that dog every day? Did you have a paper route? Tell me who influenced you in your life and why. And basically, his name was Jim Mead, and basically he would tell you that he knew everything he needed to know about the person in terms of their competence and their character and their ability to work with others. He learned what he needed to know from the study of their history, their personal history, which was basically what Neil had me doing 10 years earlier with my life story. I think that's where we know that. I mean, we can show up, nobody knows that like we know it. And we can show up with confidence, and nobody can question it. Nobody can take it away from us, and we can own it. And boy, does that help.
Sounds like you've used that many times, that tell me your life story approach.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you differentiate between two common leadership mindsets. The seat of the pants incidental mindset that's haphazard and primarily reactive, and the intentional mindset that's anchored in a leader's beliefs and purpose and is disciplined and nimble. With so much evidence that thoughtful, proactive leadership produces better results, why do so many leaders seem to settle for less?
Well, one of my mentors was Warren Bennis, and Warren would I think it was in 1987. God, we're old. You remember those days too.
Sure.
He and Bert Nannis coined the word. It's a VUCA world. VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. And that was before the internet.
Right.
Okay. Today, I used to describe it as a VUCA world on steroids, which is what it has felt like to leaders of the day. A recent cultural anthropologist, James Cassio, has created a new word. It must be true because you can Google it. It's called Bani, B-A-N-I, brittle, anxious, nonlinear, incomprehensible, to describe the world we're walking in today. Brittle, anxious, nonlinear, incomprehensible. Well, all leaders are facing a tsunami of things to react to. And as this tsunami is growing, it's hard for them to find a way to be proactive. They can barely keep their heads above water. So they tend to be reacting to everything, and they tend to react by the seat of their pants without their rudder in the water. And that's just dangerous territory. I would also say that not only are we as leaders encountering that, everybody that works with us is too. They're swamped. And they need leadership more now than ever. And a leader's job is to be there for their people. And it's hard for me. I mean, the leader is totally dependent on these people in the first place. And it's hard for me to be asking people that work for and with me to be leaning into their job if I'm not leaning into our relationship. And so I think you've got to be more proactive. Seat of the pants just won't work. When I started, there were and I'm old. When I started 50 years ago, there were guys going off to the golf course at 2:00 in the afternoon and playing rounds of golf, not just on Fridays. And, it was a simpler time. There were structures in place. You did what you were told. If you didn't know what to do, you'd ask your boss. Can't even do that anymore because your boss doesn't know how to do your job. And so there's just this high level of anxiety. And I think as a leader, your mindset needs to be, I've got to be more intentional here. I've got to help my folks find their way through this tsunami of stuff that's washing over us every day. You can't get away with it anymore. You just not and have an enduring proposition. So I'm a big believer that seat of the pants might have worked in the old days, but it doesn't work today. And everybody I know that is building organizations that promise to be enduring is doing it in a very intentional way. And
yes.
So I think that's the path we all need to be thinking about.
Well, you mentioned one time your favorite TED Talk, or one of your favorite TED Talks. And let me preface this with many people seem to chase the next opportunity, with little focus on the distant future. And there's, of course, risk in that approach, like investing in the latest hot stock. They could be trading short-term gain for long-term value. Now, the title of one of your favorite TED Talks by New York Times commentator David Brooks is titled, "Should You Live for Your Resume or Your Eulogy?" My question is, how can that provocative question help a person on a journey of self-discovery and self-development? Well,
I think resumes become very seductive, and wanting to have all these accomplishments noted by the people with whom you work. I've got the corner office, I've got the parking space, I get the long-term bonus, and I've got the title, everything that would show up on a resume that my executive recruiter friend Jim Mead would say isn't important.
Right.
And then you and David Brooks would say, we tend to be seduced into living for our resume. It's it's measurable. It's easy to look at. Did I get promoted or didn't I? His observation is that we get seduced into focusing on our resume, and we sort of lose sight of our eulogy and what are people going to say about us when we're gone. And when you start to reflect on that, I found that reflection very helpful. He drew his learnings and his thought from a a rabbi, Joseph Soloveitchik, who wrote about this and talked about the tension between your resume and your eulogy. I don't find it that way. I find it really healthy to look at both and to learn from one to influence the other. If I want as I reflect on my life story, and I know what matters most to me, I want that to influence how I think about my resume. Those are the important things. And so I don't see the tension in that. I see it as a both and situation. I want to have a productive life today, but I want to do it in a way that honors the way I want to hear about myself in my eulogy.
Yes.
So what we talk about in the Blueprint book is it's not either or, it's both. And your eulogy can drive the thought process. And by the way, you can do both. Over my lifetime now, I've been increasingly focusing on the things that matter most to me in life. And the more I focus on them, the better I do every other which way, my resume.
Sure.
This is not an either or choice here. This is a both and. They inform the others. But you got to get beyond just living for the resume. That is a long walk on a short pier.
Hey there, Leadership listeners. We have something special for you. As a thank you for tuning in, we're offering you a free copy of Roger Dean Duncan's award-winning best-selling book, Change Friendly Leadership. In this book, you'll discover a proven framework for leading change that people will actually buy into, without all the stress and resistance that often stand in the way. You'll also learn powerful strategies to improve relationships both at work and at home, creating a healthier, more productive environment for everyone. To claim your free copy, just head over to changefriendly.com. Don't miss out on this opportunity to transform your good intentions into great performance. Again, grab your free copy of this best-selling book at changefriendly.com.
Well, this leads me into something that I've been very interested in that I've heard you talk about. You suggest that leaders make better decisions if they realize their spheres of influence extend across 3 time zones: the past, the present, and the future. Tell us what you mean by that.
Well, I think if you want to be effective, I actually wrote a blog on this about being a leadership time traveler. In my experience, a leader has to learn from and honor the past, perform in the present, while setting the table for a more prosperous future. And if you think about those 3 time zones, you can't help but start to work your way back from what do I want the future to look like? What can I learn from the past to influence that so that I deliver in the present? If you just focus, when I was first a CEO, and this was, 24 years ago, we were worrying about quarterly earnings and how are we going to perform this quarter? And we were counting the pennies. I mean, that was the nature of business then. Thank God we're not there anymore. But it just drove you into this mindset that just forget the past. That was yesterday. We got it delivered today, and we'll play, and then we'll do it by the seat of our pants the next quarter. And what so many companies fell into, what a friend of mine, Jim Kiltz, would call the circle of doom. They kept focusing on the present and scrambling to deliver on it, and then focused on the next present quarter and scrambled to deliver on it. And they compromised their ability to thrive over time. I think the only way to do this is to think all 3 time zones and make sure that what you're doing today is not compromising what you hope to do tomorrow. If it is, you got to rethink it.
Yes, I would assume that adopting that paradigm requires a little practice. You have to kind of stop to force yourself to think about the implications of a particular decision you're making on all 3 time zones. But I would hope that after you've done that a while, it becomes somewhat natural.
Yeah, yes, I would agree with that. But where you start is on the big things.
Sure.
As a leader, you're faced with decisions all day long. But you have a purpose with your company. You have values that are articulated. You have an operating model you're working with at a high level. And I have found that if I focus on the big things, like I'll give you a simple example. When I was at Campbell Soup Company as CEO, we created this mission wanted to be the company that nourished people's lives everywhere, every day. And Campbell Soup had this unique ability to own the nourishing idea because so many people had grown up with Campbell Soup and a grilled cheese sandwich on a cold day.
Right.
Everybody had a Campbell Soup nourishing story. And so at the highest level, every employee was challenged to if you're not sure what to do, you nourish. You nourish until you figure it out. If you're not sure what to do with your investor, you nourish that relationship. Your sales, your customer, you nourish that relationship. And you nourish it in a way that's going to honor our past. It's not going to compromise our ability to deal with the present. And it should be setting the table for a stronger relationship that will allow us to chart a more prosperous future. So, and if you start thinking about it at that high a level, it starts to influence everything you do as you get into the ins and outs of individual issues and thinking.
Well, sure. And I can see how this 3 time zone paradigm clearly helps with decisions in every part of your life, including, of course, even most importantly, your personal relationships. As you well know, effective leadership is not confined to grand gestures and high-profile public appearances. It can manifest itself in something simple and personal. In your book, Touch Points, you tell about how, as CEO of Campbell Soup Company, you sent handwritten notes to employees more than 30,000 times. Why did you do that, and what was the impact?
Well, I have this belief that in that book, I wrote it before I retired, and I believe it's how you have to lead in the 21st century. It's not the grand gestures, it's how you connect with people over time, and you build this reservoir of trust and respect that serves you well as a leader when you're not in the room and they have to represent you, all those people. If you want to have an enduring legacy of contribution. And so when I wrote the book, I had just finished teaching a class up in the Pocono Mountains to a group of high potentials in our Campbell's CEO Institute. And the woman who was my co-author of that book, Meta Norgard, we were wrapping up this session, and we were walking around the reservoir debriefing before we went back to the insanity of the real world. And she said, how can you go back to that world with the phones ringing and the meetings and the frenetic pace? And how can you deal with all those little things? And I said to her, which is how we gave birth to the book, I don't view it that way. I view all of those interactions as opportunity to make a contribution, to make a difference in someone's life, and to be helpful. And so, and the thank you notes are one example of that, only one. I did a lot of things like that, which ultimately, as a sidebar, helped us go from having the worst employee engagement in the Fortune 500 to the best employee engagement in the Fortune 500 over the decade I was there. And it was not grand gestures. It was all the little things that were tethered to our desire to nourish people's lives everywhere, every day. And so in this particular instance, I wrote I had a 2.5 hour commute home every night. My executive assistant would print out from our portal all the stuff that had gone on that day. I would read it on the way home. I would identify people I wanted to send notes to. And when on my way in, I would write 10 to 20 notes a day. And then I did it once on the weekend. So I did it 6 out of 7 days a week.
Amazing.
It was almost addictive because it was like if you ever got into running, and you stopped, you'd feel guilty. You were looking for the runner's high. And what I discovered was that even though we were in dire straits in the beginning, there were so many things that were going right. And we had just developed this company that was just looking for things that were being done wrong. And we were trying to fix them. We were a great critical thinking machine. But 90% of the stuff was being done brilliantly. So I just decided to shine a light on that, 10 to 20 notes a day. I would learn about it one day. The note would go out the next day, handwritten. And if it was to one of our operations abroad and it was an important thing, I would FedEx it to the person's home.
Wow.
And their partner would say, "It looks like you got a FedEx from the CEO, your CEO." And they would open it up, and it was a short note, and it would say, "Thanks so much for helping us over-deliver on the third shift in Sydney, Australia this last quarter." Or, "I saw you it could be anything. It could have, I was celebrating a number of things. They were all very specific. They were linked to our performance. And when I was retiring, I think it was an interview with Forbes. It might have been with Fortune. The reporter asked me, "Well, I understand you write a lot of notes." And I said, "I do." "Well, how many?" And I said, "Well, we've never calculated it." So we sat there, got out my calculator, and we said, "I'm doing 10 to 20 notes a day, 6 days a week. I've been doing them for 10 years. And just to our employees. I send other notes out too. That's another story." And it turned out I sent out over 30,000 notes. And we only had, at our peak, we only had 25,000 employees. So wherever you went in the company, you could go to Papua New Guinea or an accounting center in Connecticut, you would see a handwritten note from me posted with a thumbtack in a cubicle, wherever you went. And over time, it changed the culture, reinforced our values. The interesting thing was the people that worked for me said, "Do you expect us to send all these notes out? Are you telling me something?" I said, "No, but I do expect you to celebrate contributions of significance with your people. We've got to bring some balance to our dialogue with our employees. We're going to deal with what's wrong, but we're going to celebrate what's right." And each person found a way to do that worked for them.
Well, of course, there's something really special about a handwritten note. That's kind of a lost art.
Well, but I was doing it in a car. Somebody was driving. I wasn't. I was doing it in a car.
Thank you for clarifying that.
And I can't type. And I didn't have there wasn't much technology infrastructure back when I was doing this. So I didn't have them read. I just hand wrote them.
Well, I drove by the Campbell soup plant in Paris, Texas a couple of weeks ago.
Sure.
And I was with my daughter and I said, "I'm just thinking that somewhere in that plant, there are some Doug Conant notes scotch taped to somebody's door or on their bulletin board or in their cubicle." And she didn't know what I was talking about, and I told her about it. And
well, I don't know. A lot's changed, but you know what happened? I believe you know. I was in a near fatal automobile accident in July 2nd, 2009, and without living the story, I survived. The only thing I would say is I am living proof you can put Humpty Dumpty back together again. But okay. I was in the hospital for several rounds of surgery. And I don't know if you remember the movie Miracle on 34th Street.
Sure.
Where they bring the U.S. mail into the judge at the end of the show, and because the post office has decided that this guy is Santa Claus, and they're going to deliver this mail, and it piles high on the judge's desk. Well, my wife and I, it was a hard time, and she was with me every day while we were at the hospital for weeks. And all those people I sent notes to, guess what? They sent notes to me.
Oh, boy.
And they would bring mail every day, this huge bag of letters to me, basically saying, you were there for me. I want you to know my family is praying for you.
Wow.
I have a whole shelf of notebooks that my wife and I put together while I couldn't do anything else in the hospital. We read all the notes. She created all these notebooks, and I have them to this day.
What a treasure. What a treasure.
And what goes around comes around. And I wasn't writing these notes to get notes back. But, I believe that, if you lean into a relationship with someone, the more you care about them, the more they care about you. This is not rocket science. And that's what that was validated when I went through that horrible experience.
Finally, Doug, please tell us, if you would, about the Blueprint Boot Camp. Exactly what is that? What does it provide? Who's involved in that?
Well, we work with everybody from, first of all, I founded Conant Leadership 13 years ago. And the first thing to say is I have yet to get a paycheck.
Right.
I am not paid by it. What we charge for providing our the Blueprint workshop, the Blueprint course, is designed to simply cover the cost of the people that work with me on it, so we can have a professional offering. But I don't make a penny on it, not a penny. And what we have found is that in my opinion, the most important thing for people is to figure out exactly how they want to walk in the world, and they have to go back into their life story. They're hearing from everybody, you've got a performance review. It says you got to work on these 12 things. This has got to get a little better. And what we have found is what differentiates great leaders from average leaders is people who are incredibly well anchored in how they want to show up for people. And the Blueprint process, as you said earlier, it's an inside-out process. It's designed for you to think about, what are the life lessons that I've learned from my life story? What worked, what didn't work? How has that influenced me? And then how do I want to show up for people? And it's all focused on the individual. We work with some companies, but in a more in-depth way. But our deal is, it's not about the company. It's about the individual. We're going to help you connect with these people in a way that's deeper and more profound than any employment experience they've ever had, because you care about them. And so we take them through these 6 steps in 2 days, where they reflect on their life story. They study the world around them. They build their own personal leadership model. At this point, I've worked with thousands of people in this area. And what's interesting is no 2 leadership models are the same. They design their own models based on their own life story, their own experience, their own aspirations. And if I got 1,000 models, they may have some of the same words, but there are 1,000 different models.
Sure.
And so we help them do that. And then we help them connect that model that works for them with their home company. And it's the metaphor I use, and then I'll just wrap up, is that it's like the old Venn diagrams we had in school. One is the company and the values of the company. The other one is a circle of you and your values. And there's this large crosshatched area where you can be more like yourself and do a better job of living your company's values and meeting company expectations. So we help them find a way to do that. And then we create a continuous improvement loop so they can get better and better at it. It's been arguably the most fulfilling thing I've done in work or beyond work.
Well, as Stephen Covey would say, you're living life in crescendo.
I'm working hard at it.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Doug. As always, your insights are both interesting and enlightening. I suspect a lot of our listeners are wishing you had been their CEO.
But I had a great time.
To learn more about Doug and his work, go to conantleadership.com. That's Conant, C-O-N-A-N-T, leadership.com. And to grab a free copy of my book, Change Friendly Leadership, go to changefriendly.com. That's changefriendly.com. In future episodes, I'll share my exclusive conversations with many more top thought leaders who will offer smart tips to boost your effectiveness in both your professional and personal life. Our guests include superstars like Stephen M.R. Covey, Liz Wiseman, Dory Clark, Marshall Goldsmith, Heather Younger, Bill George, Jessica Chin, and many others who have insightful things to say that you can put to good use immediately. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you can stay informed on what's coming your way. Trust me, you don't want to miss any of our episodes. And please leave a comment, even if it's short. That helps promote the show to millions of new listeners. And if there's a smart thought leader out there you'd like for me to interview, just let me know. Thanks again for joining us. Until next time, stay safe, be happy, and spread good cheer wherever you go. For Leadership, I'm Roger Dean Duncan.